So first of all, thank you for being here today. It's nice to see such a diverse group. I'm used to seeing mostly men in the audience, so it's really nice to see that there is a much better mix here, and that says something pretty good. Now, a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about is based on a lot of my failures. So I hope that you understand that you learn the best from failure, so I try to fail as much as possible. I'm also very successful at that. And so everything we're going to talk about is, usually there's a story behind it. For example, the story behind the book Notes to a Software Team Leader that I just finished writing, and it's and that book actually started because I had no idea how to be a good team leader. And so they say that the best way to learn is to teach. So I started doing workshops with team leaders, trying to understand what it means to be a good team leader. And I realized that the best thing that for me would be is to stop being a leader and become, again, a follower in a way. So a few years ago, maybe 4 years ago, I quit my job as a CTO in a successful .NET company, and I decided to become an intern at a Ruby shop. Now, this was a very interesting Ruby shop in that it was basically 6 Russian guys murmuring at their MacBook Airs. I've never used a MacBook Air, and if I knew it, probably wouldn't do it. I never used Vim before, and yet 6 months later, here I was doing both of these things and actually learning Russian in the process. I was lucky enough to be in various different teams, various different companies. One of them even, I was lucky enough to have a manager that shouted at me. Now, if you've never had that experience before, let me tell you, it was a very, very interesting day for me, because at one point I was like, this is horrible, but on the other side I was like, this is awesome. It's like being in a cage of animals fighting and saying this is horrible and awesome at the same time. Because there's nothing more you can learn about what it's like to be a manager is by being an employee that's being yelled on, literally yelled on. Now, maybe you've never been in that experience, but a lot has come over since then, and I learned a lot of different experiences. So each one of these things is based on that. And I'm writing a blog on all these weird things that I'm learning at 5wise.com. So here are interesting questions that I've been going through as I was a team leader. For example, I never got to successfully convince my team to do TDD. That was until a few years ago. Or when I first became a team leader, I was really worried that I'm going to lose my friends, the people that I was working with, because now I had to lead them and maybe tell them what to do and other weird things. So a lot of very, very difficult questions rose up. And the problem was that there was nobody there to actually answer those questions. I didn't have any mentor. I didn't have anyone to turn to, so I had to learn things the hard way. A couple of years later, I did go into a company where I had a good mentor, and a lot of the things here I also learned from him. So the question right now is this talk actually about you? Does it fit you? And you should ask yourself, are you a leader? So even if you're not a team leader, even if you're not a project manager, even if you're an architect, a scrum master, a developer, chances are you're probably a leader, or you have the potential to be a leader. And I know this in a very, very simple way, is that if you're a bottleneck, you're a leader. You see, every one of us has a special skill in the team. There's this one guy who's really good at architecture. There's this one girl who's really good at database design. There's this one guy who's really knowledgeable about Scrum. There's another who's really good about TDD. And so we have these roles. Sometimes they're defined, sometimes they're undefined. And the problem with these undefined and defined roles is that each role defines you as a bottleneck for that specific piece of knowledge. So if you're an architect, you are by definition a bottleneck, because you are the person people have to go to to make a decision about architecture. You are the person who has to make a decision. And so everyone has to line up and wait for you to make that decision. But there's also a good side to that. The good side is that you can use that power, use that bottleneck power, and turn it into a leader power. And the way to do that is by teaching the people around you to do what you do. Basically, if you're an architect, that means teaching everyone around you to be an architect, to think like you think. That way, you can get rid of them. They don't have to come to you to solve all their problems. And then you have free time to do the things you really love. And that's one of the biggest problems with being a bottleneck. You never get enough time to do the things you really want to do, like coding, or actually pairing with people and not being in all those horrible, horrible meetings. If only you could teach people how to think like you think, you could delegate some of that stuff. But we all fear that in some way. So the way I think about it, if you decide to be a leader, even if you're not an appointed leader, then you have to decide what your role is as a leader. What's the point? If you're a team leader, what's the point of you being a team leader? How do you measure that you're successful? If you're an architect, how do you measure you're a successful architect? If you are a tech lead, how do you get measured in your success? For example, at Farm Credit, I've seen different roles. There are tech leads, there are team leads, and everyone here is really trying to do the best. So I got to ask a few people, so how do you measure the successfulness of a tech lead? And I got a few different answers, but they were all very, very vague. And I think if I asked a lot of you, how do you measure a successful tech lead? I think the answers would be pretty much ranging in a lot of different things. Well, they're supposed to do this and maybe that thing as well. And most of the answers will probably be around roles. Well, they're supposed to do that. They're supposed to do this. But the way I think about it is that your true role is to make yourself unneeded. So I measure the effectiveness of a leader in any field by how needed they actually are by the team. So if I'm an architect and I can leave for a week on a vacation and the team is not stuck, that is a good point for me. Because it means that the team learns how to solve their own problems without me having to solve them. So if this week the team is able to solve one more problem without me that they had to solve with me the week before, that's how I measure my success. What skills did I give the people around me that didn't exist the week before, the day before, the month before? So basically it means that I will not be needed by the team, and that feels weird. Right? I'm an architect, but nobody needs me. So maybe they'll just fire me. Of course, that's not going to happen. What I tell people when that actually happens, because I did this, is that you level up at the company. You basically become, instead of becoming the architect, you're the person who creates architects at a team. So they now put you in different teams to create more architects. You know, it's like World of Warcraft, where you get a special piece that creates other pieces. That's level up. You become even more needed by the company. And so guess what? What's your next role as a person who creates architects? Teach other people how to create architects, to not be needed there. And then you level up even more and more and more. So each level has a meta level, where you teach other people how to do what you do best. And by that, you become unneeded, and so you can move on to the next level. And it's not true that people say that you succeed and you go up the ranks until you're not effective anymore. What happens is that you go up the ranks because you're not needed maybe anymore. And so you go to a level where you still haven't found a way to teach the people around you how to make yourself unneeded. And so you stay there until you can teach the people around you how to not need you. So that all sounds very, very meta, I guess. A bit too wishy-washy. I'm assuming that's how you say that. So if the team doesn't need you, you will always be wanted and highly valuable. And that's an important thing to remember. But many of you might be looking at me now saying, yes, that's all great, but really in my team, probably not going to happen. I mean, seriously, all the stuff that you're saying, Roy, that's great. But in my team, there are some things that might prevent me from accomplishing that task. You see, I have that special person in my team, they'll never get it. Have that right, another person in my team, he just can't talk to that person. So if only I had a better team, I would agree with you and I would try all this. And here's another fact that I realized, is that great teams cannot be hired. They can only be grown from the teams that you already have. So you will never have the perfect team. So your job is not only to grow people, but to grow them to be the team they could have been. For example, I was a team leader of a team. One of the people in the team was very, very negative. So negative where it became very unpleasant to hold daily stand-up meetings. Because that person liked to basically argue about anything, right? You'd say the wall is white, you say, no, that's probably off-white. Let's hold on there, buddy. And you know programmers, they have to. So that went on for quite a few months. And we had a lot of infights in the team. And one day I basically took that person to a coffee shop and I explained to him that he is actually hurting himself by working this way. And I asked him if he actually knew that this was happening, and he wasn't even aware of this. And it took me a few months to gather the courage to talk to him, because he was also my friend. So what we ended up deciding, he really wanted to get better. He really wanted to do something about it. He didn't know how. He didn't have a specific skill. That skill was choosing your battles, right? A lot of us do have that skill, but we miss other skills. So I sat with him and we planned a plan of attack on that skill. How do you achieve that skill? And one of the homework that I gave him was for the next couple of weeks to use the word no more than 3 times a day. And at the end of every day, send me an email. When did you use the word no? When did you use the word yes? Why? This wasn't like he would be fired if he didn't do it. This was a coaching exercise. Nothing would have happened to him. It was his choice to actually do it or not. We could have done many other things, but he chose to do that activity. And so that actually happened. And he learned over a course of a few weeks and probably over a couple of months how to at least more carefully choose his battles. I remember getting a special email that says, today I was in the stand-up meeting and this guy said X. And I remember saying to myself, don't say anything, save it. Save it for later when you actually need it. Save that no. Use that negative energy. Use it when you actually need it. And it worked. Because when he started saying no again, people actually listened. So that's another skill. And I considered myself more with a little more points, a bit more leveled up, if you will, because I taught him another skill, how to work in a team. And every person in a team has a different set of skills. So for each person in a team, you learn what set of skills are missing for them to be part of the team that you wish you had. And then you grow them towards that set of skills. A lot of people will know what they're missing, but a lot of people will not even be aware that they're missing something. And so our job is to actually talk to people. And sometimes it will be about confronting people. Not aggressively, not even assertively. Just talking to people about something that hurts them, hurts us. And that's one of the most difficult tasks in being a leader, is that you have to have some hard conversations. And we'll talk about that a bit more. I have another story, just especially for you on that. Now, Gerry Weinberg, who here has read any book by Gerry Weinberg? Okay. Gerry Weinberg I think he's about 70 or even more. He wrote probably more than 50 different books. Anything from systems, management, and to romance and science fiction. And one of the best books that he wrote, for me at least, was called Managing Teams Congruently. It took me a while to understand what the word congruently actually means. English is not my native language. I'm originally from Israel. I live in Norway, but I just watch a lot of TV. That's why I have this accent. Anyway, in that book, he said something very important. Leadership done right is a tough job. Done right is a tough job. That means that if you find your job difficult, you might be doing something right. And that, I think, is true for anything that we try to learn. So if we do choose to take those tough challenges, like having those conversations, if we do decide to grow people in our team and teach them new skills, how do we actually do that? And to understand that, we have to understand how people learn new skills. So I'm going to take another page from Gerry Weinberg's book. This time it's called Becoming a Technical Leader, another different book. Very, very highly, highly recommended. And in that book, he talks about playing pinball. And over the years, he had a favorite pinball machine, and he actually plotted out his progression in scores throughout the years. And he saw that he's almost linearly getting better. But as he zoomed into the picture, he saw something more interesting. As he zoomed into the numbers, he saw that there are periods of very, very slow learning over a long time, and then there are periods of very, very fast learning. So there are peaks. And he tried to understand when that happens. And he found that it happens when he learns something new about the game, something that he didn't even think about. For example, at one point he found that if you have more than a single ball in the game at the same time, you get double points for every hit. So then he started learning how to play the game with multiple balls in the game at the same time. And as he learned that, he became much, much better. Now, as he looked at the points even more, he started seeing that that's even more interesting. A more interesting fact is that before peaks, he actually has ravines where he's much less productive, much worse than he was. So when he had to learn a new technique of how to play the game, or how to understand the game differently, he had to unlearn what he already knew. Think about it. When you learn a new programming language, at the beginning, you're much worse than you were at the old language, right? Just to say the first hello world will take you a few days maybe, and it's a very, very annoying and uncomfortable feeling. You feel stupid, and everything about you just tells you, just go back, don't even try, just go back to using the old language. Why do you need this aggravation anyway? And that's what usually happens. When you learn new things, you become much, much less productive before you become productive again. And I think that's true for almost anything that we do in life. Any skill that we learn in life. Here's something completely different from technology. Let's assume, right? This is actually, the way I think about it is the story of my family. On the first dot, right there on the bottom, is my wife and me with no kids. Okay? About 7, 8 years ago, my wife and I were two adults just living their lives, working full-time jobs, trying to get ahead in life, trying to understand how things work, having fun together, traveling, never really having enough time to do everything we really wanted. And then, at some point, we had our first child. And instantly, we had become much worse at managing our lives. Even making food had become a chore. People had to bring food to our house. We couldn't even manage our sleep. We were like, come on, can someone just bring something to the door, please? Just don't even ring the bell. Just open the door. Just come on in. Our family would bring us food, trucks of food. I don't know where it all disappeared. I just remember, waking up at some point, eating something, going back to sleep, the child waking me up, just crazy, crazy. And we had to learn how to deal with a new member in the family who did not like sleeping at all. And so, it took a few months, but then maybe after 6 months, life became a bit easier. So we were here at the second point. And life became easier because we learned different techniques, how to deal with things. For example, to take shifts. When the baby is asleep, you sleep, right? You are with the baby, I'm going to go out and breathe actual air from the world. So shifts became an interesting issue. We had to learn. And still, we got everything done as before because we got back to work. We were still working full time. It's not like, this was before Norway. In Norway, you have a baby, bam, you're out for a year, paid, nothing, everything's great, very, very easy. But that was not Norway, my friends. So here we were, just traveling along. Life was easier again, and then bam, second child. Second boy, by the way. And instantly we had become worse as human beings who are trying to manage their life and their sleep. Sleep became a problem again. Apparently, kids wake each other up. So we had to learn how to deal with that. And no longer could you just watch two kids and one parent just goes out. You leave me with two kids, what, are you crazy? So we had to learn to split. One parent for each child, right? Local guard instead of area. And so we had to learn how to survive with two kids. And, slowly life became better. And then maybe about 6 months later, life became easier again. And we looked back at the time we only had one child. And we couldn't even fathom how it was that we couldn't live life at the beginning and just people had to make us food and all that crazy stuff. Because one child here, when we were here, one child was so easy, right? When I had two kids, if you left me with just one of them, it'd be like not having kids. Just very, very easy. I can do whatever I want. I can go to work, go to the library. He takes care of himself. So we were different people when we had two kids versus one kid. We were literally different people. We couldn't even believe that we had problems with the single child. And then, 2.5 years ago, let me tell you something. My third son was born. And instantly life, I would say we are about here currently, okay? So imagine my wife in Norway now with 3 kids, no babysitter, just waiting there, looking at the clock until I come back. Here I am with people laughing, all that. So I know that when I come home, there will be a deep ravine that I will be in. Anyway, with 3 kids, I can tell you 2 kids is so easy. 2 kids and 1 child, don't even talk to me about 1 child. I can do anything with 1 child. It's like really not having kids. Kids actually take themselves out for walks now. They just do. 7-year-old, he learns a bit of capoeira. He can defend himself. It's going to be okay. And here's the thing about learning. If you remember, if you wrote any piece of code and you looked at that piece of code a year later and you couldn't believe you ever wrote that piece of code as a person, then you are a different person than you wrote that piece of code. You learned so much. You think about code differently. I used to think that comments in code are the best thing in the world. I would have comments this big, right? They would be formatted and all the where it came from, all the history. I would have templates just for comments, right? It would be my science project to have a good commenting system. I would teach people around me. And a few years later, I went into a different job and my team leader started giving me code reviews. Did I hate those code reviews? There was nothing I hated more than those code reviews. Because in those code reviews, he made me delete all the comments. All those beautiful comments that I wrote, that I invested so much time in. And he said, if you need comments, it means that your code is not understandable. Break that up. Make that readable. Break that up. Make that readable. And so I started to fear those code reviews. I started preparing them, like what was going to say now, I'm probably going to tell me to do this. So I started removing the comments before we made the code reviews. I hated that, 3 months of that. Just looking at diffs and then saying, no, that's wrong, no, that's wrong. Now, it took me maybe 6 months to realize just how much I learned. I had to move to a different company to learn that. When I moved to a different company, I realized that I actually like the way that I write code now. No comments. Today I write without comments. I'm a different person in that field than I was a few years ago. But it was a really difficult challenge to learn that skill. I hated it. And the thing is, it was dropped on me, right? I didn't plan to learn that skill. He just decided it for me. And I hated every moment because I thought I would know everything. Because Every programmer with 5 years experience already knows everything, right? That's absolutely true. So what if we know that every skill makes you feel kind of horrible? If every skill makes you feel uncomfortable and out of your comfort zone, what if instead of it dropping in on us, we could start planning it? What if we said, okay, what's my next ravine? And I'll drop myself into the next ravine. That way, at least I have control. That way, I choose which skills I want to learn. And that's what I decided to do. That's the reason that I decided to quit my job and go become an intern. Because there were some things that I didn't know that I really wanted to learn. For example, what is the difference between the Ruby culture and the .NET culture? And I knew that the only way to realize that is to live in that culture, not to learn it in the evenings, but to work in that and to actually have your livelihood depend on being good at it. It had to be uncomfortable. It had to be difficult. Otherwise, I wasn't going to learn anything new. And that was the true learning that I had, is that if I truly want to learn, I have to make myself uncomfortable. And if we want to teach our team how to learn new skills, we have to plan with them their ravines. We have to drop them down that hole and just watch them try to climb back up again with all the love that we have for them, right? You're doing great, and they're cursing you and all that, but you're just, go on, buddy, you can do it. You push them there. But you know that when they come back up, they will be stronger. They will have a new skill. And of course, you don't just push it on them. You explain why. They have to understand why. Otherwise, they will despise you for a few months. And you do not want that. And a lot of the techniques we're going to cover today are about that, about pushing people into places where they feel uncomfortable. It is about taking a stand and saying that if I truly want this team member to have a new skill, then it is okay that they disagree with me. It's okay that not everyone agrees with me. If I know that there's something that they don't know. And a lot of times you don't know what you don't know, right? Unless you start doing something. There are things that you learn that you didn't even know yet you will learn because you had to jump into that uncomfortable area. And this slide is even a bigger zoom in into the fluctuations. There are always fluctuations. There is always kind of a random noise. But when there is a big ravine, it is truly big. You truly understand it. So don't let the small things trick you into thinking that that's a true ravine where you're learning something. For example, learning a new framework in your favorite language, not necessarily a ravine. It has to feel a little bit either scary or annoying. It has to feel like, I'm not sure that's even my job. You have to have some kind of resentment towards it. Because otherwise, it means you're doing exactly what you're used to do. So, one other important tip. If I am to throw my team into ravines, I have to go through ravines as well. Otherwise, I can never convince them to do it themselves. I have to have gone through this at least once on purpose. Because then I can explain exactly what it feels like, and I know exactly what they will go through and how annoyed they will feel. But when I talk to them, they will see in their eyes that I've been there exactly. Because everyone can tell a good liar from someone who tells the truth. Because there will be a difference. So you have to have been there yourself. And there's a good way to be there yourself. And that way is to actually grow your team. For many team leaders, the scariest thing is to start confronting people and growing them. So that will be your ravine. By trying to grow people, you will actually throw yourself into a ravine as well. Because it will be scary for you as well. It will be uncomfortable. If you are afraid to go to talk to a person that you know you should have talked to 2 months ago, that's a ravine that you should definitely go and start doing. Because by doing that, you will see exactly what happens on the other side. Maybe you'll learn something that you didn't even know, that you did not know. So that's our risk. That's actually our job. Our job is to continuously find ravines, jump into them, get everyone else into them, and then climb back up. And then every time, continuously, see that everyone is gaining new skills. But, all that sounds good and well. But seriously, who has time for that stuff? Problem solved. I mean, realistically, who has time for that stuff? Nobody. Most teams will not have time. Many team leaders will say, you know what, Roy? I agree with you. I would love to try that. But I don't have time to start. We're late on the thing that we were supposed to ship 6 months ago. And we were late on the fix of the thing that we supposed to ship. We were late on being late. We were so late, we were almost early. We don't have time. We are fixing fires right and left. The last thing we want to do now is to start teaching people, oh, sure, start doing unit testing. Take your time. Yeah, right. Seriously? That's unrealistic for most teams. But why? So I want to talk to you about what I call the 3 phases or the 3 areas that a team can be in. And I believe that what I just talked about is called survival mode. I believe that most teams are in what I call survival mode. Survival mode is that state where you do not have time to learn. You do not have time to grow your team. You do not have time to invest in learning new skills and actually practice them. So, yes, you can send people on a 2-day Scrum Master course. Yes, you can send people on even a 5-day TDD course with Roy Osherove. But then what? What do you do when they come back? How much time do you give them to practice slowly? 20%. How's that? You got 20% more for adding the unit tests. Great manager. Going home, kisses the wife. I give them 20% more. It's going to fail horribly. Okay? That's going to fail horribly. 20% is not even close to what a team needs to learn new skills. To learn new skills, if you teach your child, you send your newborn child, you want to teach them how to tie their shoelaces. So you send them on a 2-day lace Scrum Master course. And then they come back and you expect them to tie their shoelaces just as fast as you. You know what? 20% slower. How's that? Of course, that's going to fail horribly because your expectations are very different than reality. In reality, and there's a book called Slack, that's all that book talks about. Time to learn. How much time does it take to do slow practice until you learn a new skill? 3, 4, 5 times more, sometimes 10 times more. On the first couple of months, if you send your team to do unit testing, you want to give them time to learn a new skill, you have to be prepared to give them at least 300% more time on all tasks. 500% more time for a couple of months at least, where they can slowly try to do this in a test-driven way. If you don't, what's going to happen? Yeah, we don't have time for the unit testing thing anymore. We tried, but we just can't seem to get the time for it. You get back into that old argument. Survival mode is when you don't have time to learn. If you have made time to learn, then you could be in learning mode. Learning mode is when you choose to start pushing your team into ravines and you do slow practice to do those ravines, to actually learn new skills. And what's the point of the learning area, the learning phase, the learning state? The point is to get the team and teach them new skills until they don't need you anymore. Remember, that's the ultimate goal. So the learning phase is about teaching skills to solve their own problems. Quality problems, decision problems like how to talk to the customer, how to talk to QA, how to talk to different departments. Any skill that the team needs you in order to accomplish their task, be it quality or communication with the outside world, that's what you learn in the learning phase. How do you learn that? You get the team with you. You never do things alone. You always have someone with you to learn a new skill. You go to a meeting with stakeholders, you bring someone from the team with you. Someone is always learning from you. Because you are the bottleneck. You are the bus factor. Who knows what the bus factor is? The bus factor is the amount of people who have to get hit by a bus for the team to stop working. Okay? A bus factor of 1 is the worst. Okay? It's like a bottleneck, but really bad. So, whenever I see a bus factor in a team, I stop whatever they're doing and I say, you cannot work alone from this moment on for at least, let's say, a month or 2. Until I see that you are no longer a bus factor. There are other people in the team that can actually get things done. And then we're truly moving into the self-organization phase, which is when the team doesn't need you. When all you have to do is start setting goals and constraints. And that's what all these agile methodologies talk about. Lean as well. And, and I am a big believer in a lot of agile methodologies. But this has nothing to do with the methodology, with the specific methodology. It is all about techniques for teaching people skills. Whatever the skills you want them to learn, you can teach them. Self-organization is when a team can handle their own stuff and get things done. And the trick is to understand that a team can move between these areas very, very quickly. A team can be self-organizing 1 week and then immediately go back to survival mode the week after, because they have taken on a project which they have no idea how to build. Because, for example, reality changed and immediately they need to have new skills because reality has changed. They have to start talking to new people. They have to build something they've never built before. And so they go back to survival mode because they don't even know how much time they need. Maybe they'll go back to learning mode. Why is it important to learn about these different states? Because for each state, there are things you can do and there are things that you shouldn't do. For example, in the survival mode, I would not recommend that you teach your team how to do unit testing in TDD. It just is not going to work. It's an unrealistic expectation. In the survival phase, you get your team out of survival phase. For example, in survival phase, you might need to be a different type of leader. You might need to be a more command and control type of leader to get your team out of the survival phase. As they say, if the Titanic is sinking, the captain doesn't call a meeting, captain gives orders. That's what you do in survival mode, is you get everyone to do what they do best, not what they do worst. That's what you do in the learning phase. Do what you do best. You take a hard line a month from now and you say, in a month from now, we are changing our estimates so that we can start learning. Here's what we can do in a month. But otherwise, we have to start changing our estimates. We're rebooting the team. And then in a month, you go into learning mode. Now, that's difficult too. But that's management, leadership done right is difficult. It is our job. And our job a lot of time is to having to pick between features, time, and quality, right? We always have to pick two of these, unfortunately. And usually what goes away is the quality. So let me give you an example. What happens in real life? You're in survival mode. You're in survival addiction. This might sound weird, but a lot of teams really like being in survival mode. Really, really like it. They hate it and they love hating it. They're really good at hating it. They're really good at working under pressure. Really good at putting out fires, right? It's called heroism, right? Oh yeah, I stayed up last night, just fixed the bill, it was failing, whatever. Yep. Hero. So when you see that, you realize that people are addicted to this phase. And this phase actually leads into more and more survival. Here's an example. You're in survival mode and you're faced with a dilemma. I need to write this feature. Should I write test or just get it done? Well, we don't have time, so let's fix the fire, get the feature done. Feeling pretty good, right? We shipped it. We feel good. Next week. Oh, we have another feature. Should we write test? Should we just get it done? Well, what did it feel like to just ship it last time? Oh, it felt pretty good. Let's do that again. And that's the definition of addiction. Believing that what you're doing is the only thing you could have done, is the best thing you could have done, and then just repeating it. So, a month later, and of course, how many people here have ever said in their work, we have to rewrite this whole thing? Okay, right. How many people ever got the chance, though? Okay, so basically everyone is working with a prototype for 10 years, right? With the same prototype. You know how in Agile they say, well, we just prototype this, we'll create, what's the name for that?
Spike.
A spike. Let's spike it. Let's spike it. Dangerous. Because a spike is much more than that, unfortunately. And that's the problem, is that spikes, we start with this, with all these good definitions, and then we don't have time to do anything about it. Because we're in survival mode. So if we start acknowledging that fact, and we start making time to do that, if we are in learning mode, we will get rid of that spike, because it's part of our learning, how to do things. Because we have time to just sit there and think how we would do that. But we don't have that time today. So here's the flow of logic. We have to get out of survival mode because we need time to learn, because the whole point is to grow our team so they can solve their own problems, so they don't need us. So we want to teach them skills, but to teach them skills we need time. We don't have time because we're in survival mode. So let's make time. So to break survival addiction, you actually have to first acknowledge your problem, thank the Lord, and start taking risks. You have to start removing commitments. Usually survival mode is created because you're overcommitted. So we're all agile. Everyone here is in an agile user group. Everyone feels pretty good about themselves. Me too. But the truth is, when push comes to shove, I too did the wrong thing. So one of the projects, the first project that I was leading, I had 3 months to finish an 8-month project. Right? I knew, everybody knew. How many people here ever worked in a project where on the first day you knew it was going to fail? On the first day of the project. What the hell? How are we letting this happen? We are the ones who let this happen. Seriously. Because we are the ones giving the estimates. So when I came to my manager and said, look, it's not going to be 3 months. Seriously, it's not going to be 3 months. And my manager, he looked at me, right, and he took his glasses off and said, Roy, I trust you. I know you can do this in 3 months. The company needs you. Can you do it? So here I was, my first team. What the hell did I say? Yes, I think we can. Yes, we will try. Yes, you know what? We'll make an effort, sir. And of course, 8 months later, we were done. So that was a failure. But here's something that I learned on that project. Because I knew that the project was already doomed, nobody cared, might as well do it on the best way possible. Right? We were already doomed. We're already going to fail. Might as well fail in the best way possible. How do you fail in the best way possible? You do everything you wish you would have done. So we did unit testing and we did TDD on that project. We did everything we could on that project to be proud of it. It wasn't perfect, but we learned so much on that project. And we still got done in 8 months. So we actually got done in the same estimate that we had. Of course, the management also knew that it's really not going to get done, because reality is always reality. Everybody knew this was going to fail, but at least we failed in the best way possible. We were proud of our code that we never shipped. But it was great code. There is a culture in the place I come from to sometimes take away souvenirs when you leave a job. For example, the code that you wrote that you're so proud of. To this day, I have a CD at home in Visual Basic 6 with all the code that I wrote in that project. Still very proud of it, by the way. But the thing is that we knew, so we at least took a chance. We did something. But I should have said no. I should have said, actually, that's not possible. And if I had said that, maybe I would even be more respected. Because what's the purpose of having a team lead if they just keep saying yes? What's the point of being a team leader if you're just there to forward messages back and forth? You're just a message bus, basically, right? So architecturally you work well, but you have no definition on the outcome. And usually you get paid more because your job should be more difficult. But a lot of us like to just take the money and not do all the hard stuff. So here's what I currently believe is this is the current way that I think about a team. If we ever had a manifesto for leaders, this is the way I would start writing it. We believe that great teams are grown, not hired. And the goal of leaders is to continuously grow the skills of the people in their team to the point of self-organization. Happier teams make happier customers and employers. So to achieve this, we must continuously challenge ourselves and our team to become better instead of keeping everyone in their comfort zone. Just-in-time, adaptive leadership style instead of a one-style-fits-all leadership approach. That means that if I'm in survival mode, I'll be a different type of leader than I will be in the learning phase. And we will participate in human interaction, at least as much as we do with machines. A lot of team leaders like to interact with machines much more, with emails, much more than they do with other humans in their team. Actually, a lot of people are afraid of that, so that's a very good way to immerse yourself in technology instead of actually facing human beings around you. And this is a longer version. I won't show you the entire thing, but basically it's a bit more of a detailed process of how I believe these things should actually work. But the idea is that we always experiment with people, with tools. We do a continuous experimentation with human beings. Now, to achieve that, one of the things we have to know is how to influence other people. Because many of you might say very, very wisely that you'll never get your manager to sign off on giving you that extra time. You'll never get your manager to sign off on giving you budget for that machine, or to get the team to a place where they can learn new things with different hardware, or anything you actually wanted from your management or from other people in the team. So if you want to grow other people in your team and people just disagree with new learning, what do you do about that? It's actually very hot here. Maybe we can increase or decrease the temperature a little bit. What do you think? I have no idea how to do that, though. I'm glad everyone agrees, though. You know? Okay. Do not be afraid to lower the temperature of the air conditioner. Or is a person is refusing to do something, or is a person is always late to a stand-up meeting. The world around that person is perfectly designed for that behavior to happen. So if you lived where they lived, if you had his parents or her parents, if you had their education, their car, their pets, their kids, their knowledge, their school learning, you would have done the exact same thing as they were. So we have to start figuring out what in the world around that person is designed to make that behavior happen. So one of the biggest takeaways for me from that book is that as developers, as rational beings, we try to just convince other people. Isn't that nice? We just think that if we just explained all the things that make sense, why you should do, let's say, TDD, then everyone will just say, you know what? Makes sense. And from that moment on, everyone will just happily just do test-driven development. All the bits will be in place. You have turned over all the bits from 0 to 1. And so everything will just change because it's just a logical thing, right? Why wouldn't you do TDD? Your quality will be higher. You'll release things faster. Why wouldn't anyone do TDD? And yet so many other people are not doing it. So here's what we really are thinking about. There are 3 categories of influence forces. For each category, there is motivation and ability. For example, personal motivation, why would you want to do that? And personal ability, can you actually do that? As developers, we usually try to approach people on the first 2 things. We want people to do TDD, we give them the ability, we send them to a course. Now, we just have to talk about motivation. Why wouldn't you? And maybe they say they would, and yet they don't. Has anyone ever agreed with you and then continued to do the exact opposite of what they agreed with you? What the hell? And so, I like this book because it gave me another framework, a different checklist. So when I have no idea what the hell is going on, I look at the rest of the points. What about social motivation and social ability? Social motivation is what in the people around that person motivates that person for that ability. Is there someone that person really respects that does the opposite of what you'd like them to do, right? If it's an architect that you want them to do the domain-driven design, but they keep doing it a different way, maybe they're part of another group of architects that believe that domain-driven design is hell, is the devil. What about social ability? Social ability is how people react around that person when they do a specific behavior. Do they applaud the wrong behavior? Do they push for the wrong behavior? Do they laugh at them when they do the right behavior? If you're the only person doing test-driven development in a team not doing TDD, and every time you wrote a test, everyone would just sit there and look at you with these looks, saying, really? Really, that's what you're going to do? It's a waste of time, don't you know? And everyone keeps saying that to you, week in, week out. How long before you stop? And so this idea of social ability and social motivation is about looking at the people around the person and trying to see what are the influences. How do they react? Maybe that's where the problem lies. Maybe it's not there. What about the environment around that person? Environmental motivation is about rewards and punishments, maybe at the company level. Is that person getting more money for doing the wrong behavior? Are they getting rewarded or acknowledged for doing the wrong behavior? What happens when you do the right behavior? Do you get punished? As an example, in his book, Succeeding with Agile, Mike Cohen has a nice story about this. He was teaching people about pair programming. And one person just left the room, said, I'm not going to do this, left the room. So he tried to understand what the hell happened. And that person, then when he sat down, he realized that in that company, you were judged every year. You would get a bonus based on the quality of the code that you created. But if you did pair programming, no one would know which code was yours. So you'd actually get less money if you did pair programming in that company. And that person, or at least that person thought that's what's going to happen. And so they decided that that's not going to be a good idea. They had to change company policy, get the CEO to change and send an email to all the employees. Maybe that would have helped. So maybe there are rewards and punishments at the company level, or maybe at the team level. What about environmental ability? That's the physical environment around us. If the person is always late for a stand-up meeting, are they physically able to go to the stand-up meeting at time? How far are they from where the meeting is taking place? Is there an elevator? Do they have physical problems walking? Do they need a wheelchair? Right? If you want to do pair programming, but all your tables are those where you have this half moon inside the table just for my stomach, you know? So then people who want to pair with you, they have to sit behind you to see your code. So maybe that's the reason nobody does pair programming, because it sucks to do pair programming that way. Maybe nobody's doing unit testing, not because they don't want to, because the company doesn't have a budget for a build server. Maybe that's what needs to change. And so maybe everyone says they really want to, but something just doesn't click. It could be a single thing, could be multiple things at the same time. So out of all these 6, you could have all 6 working against you. So you have to start playing Sherlock Holmes and understand what's going on with that person. The first thing you have to do is talk to that person. To understand personal motivation, the worst thing you can do is tell a story about that person in your head. Because that's a good way to avoid conversation. I know exactly what they're going to say. Yeah, you already failed. If you tell yourself that, and that prevents you from talking to that person, you've already failed. Because that story we tell ourselves in our heads, that's exactly our brain trying to avoid confrontation. We have to go and talk to the person and actually confront the problem. And then maybe understand what the hell is going on with that person. Why? I noticed you never do this. Why? But we're always afraid to ask that. Maybe we hint. We don't want to hurt other people's feelings. It makes sense. So we hint about it. Nobody gets the hint. Some people actually need to hear you say that. One-on-one, of course. Never with the other people in the team. One-on-one. Sit there, respect them, and ask the questions directly. It's tough, but you have to do it. I was once in a team where I had a team member who was a very, very slow typist. Everyone on the team really didn't like working with him too much because everything was so slow. Everything was with the mouse. You know, you wanted to go to something, it's 55 clicks with the mouse to go somewhere. I was a keyboard junkie. It was difficult for me to work with him as well. He was my friend. He was a great person. Still difficult to work with him. And so I went and I bitched about it to my manager. I said, I don't know what to do. I guess we're stuck. Because I'm never going to tell him that, right? What, am I crazy? Actually go and tell him that there's a problem, that he types too slow? What are you going to do with that? It's like saying to someone, you're kind of short. What are they supposed to do with that? But I was wrong, because typing is a skill. And so what you can do is you can actually talk to the person and find ways for them to learn that new skill. But that's a very difficult thing. Because my manager said, and that I was lucky to have that person as a mentor, he said, you should go and tell him what you told me. Not exactly the same way, but find a reason for them to want to do it. They should have a reason. If you think it hurts them, explain. People who think things hurt them usually want to change those things. And then he said something that clinched it for me. He said, this will be your growth. This will be your ravine. Because I've never done that before. And so that convinced me. And I said, you know what? I should definitely do that. And so the distance from my manager's office to where the person was sitting was basically where you're sitting. Right? So you imagine it's that door over there. And so I closed the door of my manager's office and I decided I'll just go and talk to him. Just get it over with, right? It was a horrible feeling. And I started walking to that door. And I remember looking at my hands and they were shaking because I was so afraid of doing that talk. And I came in and I said, hey, do you have 5 minutes? Let's go sit down. He came with me. He said, sure, let's go. He was so happy. So we sat down and I talked to him and I said, and then I had an idea. Maybe something's wrong at home. Maybe that's why he's like going slowly. I'll ask him. I said, so how are things at home? And he goes, great, thanks. Why? I was like, shit. And then I asked him this question. What do you think about the way you work? Everything good? And he was like, yeah, well, pretty good. I'm happy. Everything's good, you know? Just working. And I was like, okay, he doesn't even know this is a problem. He's oblivious to this problem. And then I asked him this question. What if I told you that you could type 5 times faster? That you wouldn't need the mouse all that time. You could type 5 times faster, get things done faster. And then he turned to me and said, hey, that sounds cool. Yeah, I'd love to try that. And then I was like, really? Yeah, that's it? That's all? Seriously? This is what I've been bargaining for? They're just being scared of? And then we ended up having this plan. And I got a typing tutor software. And we made a homework. Again, homework. And in that homework, what we decided to do was that every day he would practice for 20 minutes in the morning. And then at the end of the week, he would show me how he's practiced on this article that we planned to go through. Then he would show me how fast he's typing. And then we do that every week. And after a couple of months, he was much better than he was. And he was happier, and everyone was happier because he was typing faster, getting things a little bit done. And he was starting to ask people, hey, how do I do that without the mouse? Because I taught him how to ask that when he saw other people doing that. That's a skill. The skill is to be proactive about learning something new, about seeing someone do something you don't know. And then, how did you do that? Can you show me? A lot of people are afraid to do that. And so after a few months, it was just easier to work with that person. So that worked out really, really well. And for me, that ravine was so scary, but the climb up was so easy. But I had to jump down to find out. And that's when I found out that most of the time you're much more afraid than it really is scary when you do it. And so when I do this now, I look at this And always, if I'm not sure about the personal motivation, because I haven't talked to the person, that's the first thing I always do. And only after that do I start checking off things. And in terms of having multiple things working against you at the same time, you have to fix all of them. If you have two things working against you, like personal ability and social ability, if you fix only one of them, that person will still not do the right behavior. It will not be fixed, because one thing will still stop them. You have to fix all of the things. Only when they are all fixed will behavior actually change. And then you can start using these influence forces towards good behavior. Influencing things to continue. For example, you have people learning TDD, but you don't want the flame to die. So you create social ability. You create a user group inside the company of other people just like that person wanting to learn TDD. They meet every week. Now they don't feel alone anymore. When you don't feel alone anymore, even when you go back to your company and you feel alone, you know that you're still going to meet in this user group and talk to other people who feel the same way you do. That's why Alcoholics Anonymous works. It gives you strength to not feel alone when you're struggling alone with something. So that's just an example how you can use that for something beneficial. So one thing I want to teach in the learning phase, and then we're going to finish for today, is how to grow people in the simplest way possible, and that is to challenge them. How do you push people into ravines? And there are many occasions where you can do it. For example, one-on-one planning with people, homework. But this is one occasion. And that occasion is when people come to you and request for you to be the bottleneck. Hey, can you solve this problem for me? What should we do about this architecture thing? Or, you know what? Our computers are too slow. If we only had better computers. So when people start using that language, if we only, or you know what we really need here, or all that stuff, you can turn it around and ask them, well, what are you going to do about it? And it's not like, what are you going to do about it? It's not that way. It's, what are you going to do about it? I'm asking you, I'm giving you permission to do something about it. It bothers you, what are you going to do about it? And this is a very powerful question. It has to be asked in a specific way with these specific words. If you use words that are a bit different, like, what can you do about it? It becomes hypothetical. What are you going to do about it is not hypothetical, it's fact. They either do it or they don't. And even when you know this question is coming, when you teach people that you will start asking them that about specific subjects, they still get stuck the first time they hear the question after a day or so. So when I know that a person has a skill that they need to learn, if they come to me with a problem on that skill, a lot of times I will ask them, what are you going to do about it? Because I want them to be able to solve that problem without me. If I solve the problem, I will always be the bottleneck. So if a person comes to me and I know that he has a problem talking to other people in other teams, and he says, we really need QA to work with us on this. And if I see that it's the right problem that I want to teach them to solve, then I will ask them, okay, what are you going to do about it? In the most respectful, simple way. Now, the first time that people hear this, they might be a bit surprised. So it's important to prepare them for this. To say, I will start asking you to do things that usually you ask me to do. Because I want you to learn these new skills. Because I am a bottleneck in these skills, and I want you to try to solve your own problems. If you truly want to be self-organizing, you have to learn how to solve these problems when I'm not here. People are usually very open to this, even though when you start asking, they will start to become sometimes a bit annoyed. When my manager started asking me this the first time, I went to him, I don't even remember what the problem was, but I remember coming to him and he was like, what are you going to do about it? And I said, well, I just came to you, didn't I? I just did. Just did something about it, sir. And he was like, yes, but I want you to try to solve it yourself. And I was like, oh, I'm not sure what even to do. He said, I'll teach you. Here's what you can do. And then he walked me through, but I did everything. He paired with me, but not on programming. He paired me on something political in the organization, walking between different people. What forms do you need to fill? All that stuff. That's another skill. Working inside your organization, connecting to other people. So challenging people is an important skill. And the last part is that when you challenge people, you have to ask them to commit to it. Otherwise, people will not feel committed. So they need to change the language that they use. For example, that language. I call this language the victim language. We need, I could, why doesn't someone blah, 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 blah. When we use that language, that means we leave an opening for ourselves not to do it, right? If I say, I need to lose weight, does that mean I'm going to lose weight? No, probably not, but it definitely makes me feel good. Or if we finish a meeting and someone says, okay, so we need to do this, and everyone says yes, and then the meeting is over, nobody knows what they have to do, but everyone feels really great. And then the meeting the week after, everything repeats itself. And then everyone says again, yes, we need to do this. We didn't do it last time, let's do it this time. Everyone says, yes, let's do it this time. Then the meeting's over, nobody does anything. Because nobody committed to anything. Everyone thinks that some other person is going to do it. Nobody took personal responsibility. So what I'm looking for is this. I will do something by a specific time. By the end of next week. By the end of today. But by a specific time usually. So if I ask someone, what are you going to do about it? A person has come to me and says, our quality sucks. I say, okay, what are you going to do about it? Person is a bit flummoxed. Okay, well, I guess I could probably hold up a meeting with the team and explain how to get better code quality. I say, okay, so you will what? I guess, I think I will just organize the meeting. Okay, so you will organize the meeting? Yeah, I think so. Will you or won't you? I will. Okay, by when will you do it? I don't know, tomorrow? And then I ask, tomorrow or not? Can you do it by tomorrow or not? The person will say, actually, I can't by tomorrow. You know what? I can't actually do it. You know what? That's actually pretty good that that person said it. Because by kind of forcing that language, we push away any impediments. We bubble them up. A person will not commit to something that they feel they literally cannot do. So we at least uncover hidden impediments. Well, actually, I can't do it because, I have the project manager coming in and the customer and whatever, so I'm not going to be able to do it. Okay, so now at least we know that if we got rid of those things, maybe that person could do it. So now you as a leader can help that person get rid of the impediments. But if that person is willing to commit, then they will say, okay, I will organize this meeting by next week. I will send out a meeting invitation by next week. And that's important. When people commit to something, they have to commit to things that they actually control. So if I have to work with someone, I cannot commit to working with that someone by the end of tomorrow because I don't control that someone's time unless I'm that person's manager. So if I don't control that someone's time, I can only commit to things that will lead to a specific goal. I can commit to sending a meeting request to that person by the end of today. That I can do. That's under my control. If I have 6 bugs that I need to fix, can I commit to fixing all those bugs by the end of the week? Is that possible? What do you think?
Depends on how much you know about bugs.
It depends. And even if you know something about the bugs, is it 100% certain that you will do it by the end of next week? Exactly. You cannot control bugs. Otherwise, they would not be called bugs. That's the point. They're unknown. You think you know, and then everything blows up in your face. And so, instead of fixing those 6 bugs, what can I do? I can commit to actions that will lead me to solve that. For example, if I see a person saying, yeah, I will fix those 6 bugs by the end of next week, I say, hold on, you cannot commit to that. Because then they're just telling me what I want to hear. I will stop them from telling me what I want to hear. And instead I will say, commit to something you can control. Maybe they say, I have no idea what I can control. I say, okay, you can commit to working X amount of hours each day for the next week on these bugs. The person said, okay, so based on what I'm doing, I can commit to 4 hours each day for the next 2 weeks to work just on these 6 bugs. Cool. That's a commitment. That's something that person can commit to and can actually say, yes, I can do it or I can't do it. And to finalize this thing, we have to change our leadership style. In a survival mode, I will usually be a more command and control leader. I'm more likely to give commands in survival mode because I have to get through this. I have to make more time, so I'll get each person to do what I need them to do right now. There is no time for all that agile stuff. But once I get out of there, I turn my skin and I become a coach when I can. And I coach the team to learn new skills. If I see that the team is making a mistake that we don't have time to fix. For example, I've had a Scrum Master tell me that their team decided not to use source control. They knew what they were doing, and he was like telling me, I was just a Scrum Master. I'm not allowed to tell them anything. I'm just coaching and, helping with the process. So I was just sitting there powerless, just looking at them making that mistake, and of course it failed. So you can't allow that to happen. So if a mistake costs so much that you don't have time, even with the slack time that you've created, then you abort the decision. You become a dictator for that 1 second, and you say, you can't choose that option. Give me 3 other options other than not using source control. You do have the ability to make that change. You should make that change because at the end of the day, you know exactly how much time you have, and maybe the team doesn't know what they don't know yet. So it's your responsibility to guide them on the right path. Yes, it's okay to let the team make mistakes, but the mistakes have to be fitting to the time that you actually have. If you don't have enough time, make more time or make the mistakes smaller, the range of the possible mistakes. And it's always kind of a game. You're part dictator, part coach. And then when the team doesn't need you anymore, they will just stop asking you questions. They will just ask you about the goals and constraints. And that's when the time you know that the team is basically self-organizing. When you just say, well, we need to get this done. And they say, okay, I know, okay. Cheers. You come to a stand-up meeting, and there is no stand-up meeting. You say, why don't you guys have a stand-up meeting? And they say, well, we keep talking about ourselves all the time. We don't feel we need it. So we just decide not to do it. Good. Self-organizing team. If they get stuff done, if the quality is still high, if everything's great, let them. It's their choice. They're a self-organizing team. They should be able to change their own process. If you see that they're going back to the learning phase, there's some things that they need help with, go back. Tell them that now a stand-up meeting is needed again. Stay there for a bit. See what happens then. But you can always change things. So there's always somewhere to go to. You always have to keep an eye on what state your team is in. And this is a thing that I call elastic leadership. Your leadership changes to fit the current needs of your team. And the team's needs change based on survival mode, learning phase, or self-organization. If you want to learn more, you can always find out at 5whys.com. I write a lot of stuff on that blog. You can always find out more in the new book that I just finished. And I'm actually writing a new book called Beautiful Builds because I have no idea how to do beautiful builds, so I've decided to write a book about it. And I'd like to thank you for your time. If there are any questions, I think we have a bit of time for questions right now. Thank you very much.
I was wondering if you had a good way to measure how a team is doing, like after a year or two. You know that they're much improved, but how do you actually gauge that? Things like velocity can be a little tricky because as they reduce some of the risk and make things more test automated, maybe the storage points aren't showing as much.
Well, there are 2 ways that I measure a team. First of all, I take an active part in the team's life. So I do a little development because I have time because I delegate a lot of stuff. So I do a little development. I see how difficult is it to check in a change. So I see what it's like to deliver something in the company. So I always keep my hand a little bit inside the material to see what things feel like. But the second thing that I do, which I haven't spoken of here, which I teach in the Elastic Leadership course, It's a 2-day course. And one of the things that I teach there is that there's a thing that I call clarity or a clearing meeting. In that clearing meeting, it kind of sounds like a retrospective meeting, but it's much deeper than that. In that meeting, we go around the room and we ask people, what didn't work for you this week? And people will say, for example, well, what didn't work is that the bill sucked. The bill was read 5 days this week. And then the question for that would be, okay, what are you going to do about it? Sounds familiar? And then that person will do something about it. And then we move on. And that's one of the questions in the meeting. And then one of the things I encourage in that meeting is for people to come to the meeting having already done something about it, because they know I'm going to ask them. And so every time I remind them at the beginning and at the end of the meeting, and slowly and surely, people will start saying, well, there was something, but I already did something about it. Then next week, maybe another person will start saying it. And one day, a magical day will come where everyone will say it. That's a self-organizing team. Make sense? They had problems. They did something about it without you. That's what a self-organizing team does. So that's how I measure it. Other questions? Yeah.
In your experience or in what you've been through, is there any suggestions on how to convince your leadership or management to allow slack?
Yes. Well, the technique is not how to convince them, but to understand why they're not doing it. So I would go to the checklist of the 6 influence forces for that manager, and I would try to understand their world. What influences them? Maybe the management book that they read the most is the one that tells them to do the opposite. Maybe if you know another manager that they highly respect that does what you love, if you got them to talk, maybe they will change their mind. I find that sometimes a third party changes your mind much faster than the person closest to you. Like if I talk to my wife about something, and then a person comes in and says, oh yeah, that's actually true. And she's like, okay, yeah, that kind of makes sense. And we've been arguing about this for like a week, right? And I was like, what? He just said 3 words. Apparently, if it's someone you actually respect that says it. Yeah. So I would definitely do that checklist to understand why that manager is doing what they're doing. And then, of course, I would talk to them. Other questions?
We're a really small dev team. There's 3 of us, and our project leader just became one of the 3 of us, so our team is the team. Some of the things you talked about for like what he should do were like kind of drawn away, like he only comes in like once a day, but he's like in the room with us all the time, he's doing dev work with us all the time. How would you adjust some of those things so like, that, you know, because he's more there?
But what's the problem with him being there?
There's not, but some of those things sounded like at a higher level, like somebody else was walking in, like they like had a bigger timeline, like, and they were coming in. I was wondering if there was like different techniques because it's such a smaller focused group.
I'm not sure that I understand the question, but maybe we can talk about it later. But if it's a small team and everything's working great, I wouldn't change anything. Okay? Yes. You're going to be next, I promise.
So you go through the 3 stages right up to the self-organizing stage, and you reach nirvana. But now you have a continuous improvement program in the company. You want to introduce lean, you want to have more productivity, have more done faster. What are your thoughts on how to achieve those objectives?
It's just another experiment. So a self-organizing team is a team that, as far as I'm concerned, keeps doing experiments all the time. If you remember, the whole point is to continuously grow. That means that even a team that is self-organizing still has to be in a ravine somewhere, as far as I'm concerned. So if I look at my team and everyone is just perfectly comfortable, just, you know, fat cats just sitting, just typing on the keyboard, everything's great, they don't care about it, yeah, well, whatever, just ship it. Something's wrong. I don't see an edge, I don't see a buzz. And so that continuous experiment is one thing that I would say they're not self-organizing yet until they start noticing the lack of experimentation. So if what I know how to do is how to keep people experimenting, then I will teach them how to think like that until they do. And then as far as I'm concerned, every week, every day I'll see something a little bit different, maybe every month, right? This month we're testing this new source control. This month we're testing this. This month we're testing different Kanban boards. But we're testing for the sake of testing because we don't know what we don't know. Because it's very comfortable to be comfortable. You know, all these sentences, I really like them. But yes, continuous experimentation. If the company advocates it, even better. But if I'm in charge of the team and they're already doing it, I'll just tell them to do these experiments now. It's just another experiment. And if you treat something as an experiment, it's much easier to accept it as well. It's not a marriage, right? It's very, very easy to back out. It's a month-long experiment. There's nothing to lose, only knowledge to gain from it. Yes?
You spoke about adjusting your commitments to create slack. But isn't it true that through the course of time, there's this delicate balance to strike, and at times you'll fall on the wrong side of it, where you bit off more than you can chew. And in those cases, how do you guide the team through dealing with the rough spot of having made a commitment beyond their capability or needing more slack and not having it?
So what do I do when we realize we overcommitted?
Yeah.
We recommit. We go, we talk to the product owner, and we say, we're overcommitted, we have to remove something. Please choose something for us to remove. We can only fit 5 items. Which one do you want to remove? And we do it in the fastest way possible, as quick as we know it, and that hopefully happens many times, so that it's not a big deal when it happens. Okay? So it has to be a very brave thing if you've never done it before, but if it always happens, because it does, we realize that reality changed, then we just change it. We just change along with it. And if the product owner is used to it, then it should just flow. It's just part of the work. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What about a discovery where you need some learning?
Then we estimate the learning in the task. We say we cannot commit to this, but we can commit to a week of learning on this. Otherwise, we cannot tell you anything. We just commit to learning. Other questions? Okay. Have a great evening. Thank you again for your time, and maybe I'll see you around. Thank you.